Hello everyone, we're going to do a new lesson, a truly beautiful mind. We have all heard of Albert Einstein, but we have heard of him as a great scientist. Today we're going to meet the person Albert Einstein and see why he is said to have a truly beautiful mind. He was a German American physicist. German American, you can understand, like in 6th standard we have an Indian American. So someone born in India and settled in America. So similarly he was born in Germany and he settled in America. And he was probably the most well-known scientist of this century. And his theory of relativity is the basis of most of the work in physics that happened later on. Whenever you speak, people say that Einstein was a poor student, but that's not true. Actually, he was a good student. His mother once wrote to her sister that he received his grades and he was first in the class. His report card was brilliant, but the problem is he did not like discipline in school and he could not get along with many of his teachers, and that's why he couldn't cope with studies. And once his teacher also said that he would never get anywhere, but of course we know history has proved twice. He was born on 14 March in Ulm, a beautiful city in Germany, and no one knew that at that time that he would be so great. His mother actually thought that he was a freak because his head was too big, and at the age of 2.5 he still had not started talking. There's an interesting story about his talking that everyone was worried why this boy is not talking. And one day when they were having dinner, he just said a sentence, "The soup is too hot." That was his first spoken word or sentence. So all were surprised why he had never spoken before, and the first sentence he says is, "The soup is too hot." So Albert replied that till now everything was perfect, so I didn't have to speak. That's the kind of person he is. And he couldn't communicate well with other children. He didn't know what to do with them, and they called him brother boring because he couldn't play with them. He was interested more in mechanical things and in playing by himself. And when he saw his younger sister Marja when she was born, he said, okay, she looks fine and all that, but where are her wheels? So that shows how he is so interested in wheels, mechanical things. And he once, one of his headmasters told his father that whatever profession he takes, it doesn't matter because he'll never be a success at anything. He learned to play the violin at the age of 6 because his mother wanted him to. He learned the violin, he played the violin, but he was never an expert violinist. But he learned, he knew how to play the violin. That's an additional interest he had apart from physics. He was not a bad pupil. He went to high school in Munich, and he didn't like the school's discipline there. It was very, when you look at the uniform, the way the children are standing, everything you can understand. Discipline is very important in that school. So he often had problems with his teachers, and at the age of 15 he couldn't bear it anymore and he left the school. He went to a new school because he couldn't adjust with the kind of system that they followed there. And already his parents had moved to this beautiful city of Milan, where he was left here so that he could continue his education in this school. And they had a lot of discussion. Then they decided that he will go to Switzerland because there the language is same, German, and the city is more liberal than Munich. And he was highly gifted in maths and physics, so he could do well in science there. And he applied for university also there, so he completed his schooling there and he did his higher studies there. But when he went to college, though he was interested in studies, there was something else that appealed to him. This man who had a walrus mustache. Now what's a walrus mustache? If you look at the side, you can see in the image. Apart from walrus mustache, you can see many other kinds of mustaches. I'm sure many of these have been seen on famous personalities, and you can have a nice time trying to guess who had what, like especially the toothbrush mustache. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the famous character who sports such a mustache. So apart from science, he was interested in a fellow student, and her name is Mileva Marek, and he liked her because she was a clever creature. She was very, very intelligent. Now why had this lady come from Serbia to Switzerland? Because in many places, it was in those days, it was very difficult for women to get into institutes of higher education. So that's why she came here. because she also wanted freedom. So he thought that she would be someone with whom he could fight against the people, not fight, he could stand up to the people who were against him, because she, like him, she is also intellectual, she also wants to be different, she is also a person who wants freedom. So they both fell in love, and in their letters also you can see that they are more concerned about science, about how they can do their scientific work. And by the age of 1900, at the age of 21, he completed his education and he was unemployed. So first he worked as a teaching assistant, he gave private lessons, and last he got a job in a patent office in Bern. And actually in the patent office he's supposed to be assessing other people's inventions, whether it is good enough and all, but actually he was developing his own ideas in secret. And he called his desk drawer in that place the Bureau of Theoretical Physics, because all his theories about physics were kept inside that drawer. And one of his most famous papers, that's the Theory of Relativity, was published around this time, that is in 1905. And one thing that he says, see, if you have two clocks which are perfect, their timing is perfect, and they are taken on a journey, and one of them is moving very fast, then when they come back, they will not show the same time. You can't say that the clock is wrong, it's just that it is relative, it depends on the situation. And after this, he got the most important relationship between mass and energy, E is equal to mc square. We are all familiar with this equation, we have done solving using this equation. But while he was doing well in physics, he was going ahead in the field of science, his personal life was unraveling. It was in a very bad shape. That is, earlier actually he wanted to marry Mileva, but his mother was not against it, because she felt that Mileva, who was too older to him, who was 3 years older than her, was too old, and she felt that she is also an intellectual, you are an intellectual, so how will your life get on? But they got married later in 1903. They had 2 children. Unfortunately, the marriage faltered. It lost strength, it lost momentum, it broke up. And she, after marriage, after children, she became like a housewife, and she wasn't that interested in science, so they started moving apart. At last they got divorced, and he married his cousin Elsa. You can see a picture from the wedding here. And in 1915 he published his general theory of relativity, that is time and space and gravitation, they don't have any separate existence from matter, what he says. Anyway, there was an eclipse in that year, and it was able to actually establish that his theory was correct, and the papers called it a scientific revolution. In 1921 he received the Nobel Prize, and all over the world everyone was praising him for his wonderful. Then the Nazis came to power in Germany. He couldn't tolerate the kind of situation there, so he went to United States. After 5 years in Berlin, they discovered nuclear fission, and you know that the nuclear bomb is based on that. So those people were aware that, see, this can be very dangerous, and they were all highly worried. So one of them told Einstein to write a letter to the American President Franklin Roosevelt, in which he said that if you use a single weapon of this type in a port, it can destroy the entire port as well as some of the surrounding territory. He wanted to warn Roosevelt so that such a thing will not happen. But it had the opposite effect. The Americans developed an atomic bomb based on this, and they dropped it on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. He felt very bad about it. He wrote a public letter to the United Nations where he said we should have a world government. Only when we have individual governments will we fight. So let's have a world government. But there was no impact of this letter. But for the next 10 years, that is till his the end of his life, he continued campaigning against arms, and for peace and democracy. And because of his work for entire mankind, he was regarded as a world citizen. Something that he has said is very interesting. He says, see, mankind invented the atomic bomb, but no mouse would ever construct a mouse trap. See, no mouse will construct something to kill itself, but mankind invented the atomic bomb to kill himself. And he says, if I had known that the Germans would not succeed in producing an atomic bomb, I would not have lifted a finger. I would never have written that letter if I had known that it would have this kind of an effect. So his letter, the part of the important part of the letter is given here. You can read it. and this was then a newspaper headline. But at that particular time, they didn't know that it would have such far-reaching effects. Like here, they just know that so many may have been killed, so much may have happened, but they never guessed that this would be the range of destruction. And after that, he, along with many other leaders, worked for world freedom, peace and unity. You can see here, see, there lies before us, if we choose, continual progress in happiness, knowledge and wisdom. Shall we instead choose death, because we cannot forget our quarrel? So if we continue to quarrel, we'll only die. Should we do that as human beings? Remember your humanity and forget the rest. If you can do so, the world lies open to a new paradise. If you cannot, there lies before you the risk of universal death. So if you can forget your quarrels, you can lead a happy life. But if you continue fighting with others, your life is in danger. So why do you want to do that? So actually, this person is really a person with a beautiful mind, with a great mind. So all of you, please read more about this person, find more about this wonderful personality,